Welcome to the Good Success Podcast, where we encourage and challenge purpose-driven entrepreneurs to create, build, and maintain profitable businesses so they can have more to give more. Our motto is to be a conduit, not a bucket. Work to have to give. We hope you enjoy the show. Welcome back to the Good Success Podcast. I am your host, Tom Olson, and I've got Lane Kawaoka. Did I say it right?
Got it, Tom.
All right, Lane Kawaoka. He is from Hawaii, and obviously a name like Kawaoka, you kind of think of Hawaii. And one of the girls that's actually helps us run our mastermind, Erin, she lived in Hawaii for about 8 years. Her husband was in the military, and he ran all the Pacific oil out of, for all of the armed forces, right out of, Hawaii, the base right there in Honolulu. And we got to go out and meet him. And we went out there on our 20th anniversary and kind of toured a couple of the islands and had a great time in there. But Lane has got over 3,000 units, and I can't wait to be able to pick his brain today. Obviously, a lot of people that listen to this are in real estate. Not everybody, but a lot of people are. And a lot of the stuff that we kind of bring in is a little bit about real estate. But I'm always trying to pull out the life lesson and pull out the parts of business that really make the difference. So much talk is just about how to do a deal, and that's kind of easy. You can kind of find a lot of that stuff, just kind of searching and by, hard knocks. But really, I'm always looking for the hard lessons that people had to learn. And I'm just looking to be able to inspire and encourage everybody out there that you can make it, you can survive, but also you can matter in this world. And that's really kind of something that's kind of been in my mind this week. Especially, listening to the news and listening to, honestly, I've even had to take social media hiatuses just because I can't handle it. There's just too many people out there that who just want to complain. They want to blame the government. They want to do everything they possibly can to go take from somebody else instead of just taking personal responsibility and creating goals and focusing on those things and making sure that not only they just do it for themselves and not only so they can just be a bucket, but they can also be a conduit to be able to help other people. So I'm really excited to have Lane Kawaoka on today, and he's gonna be a conduit for our audience today, and he's gonna teach a little bit of the things that he's done. So Lane, what island are you on?
So I'm on Oahu right here. That's where Honolulu is, kind of the main populated island.
So you're right there. We actually stayed at the Disney resort that's right there on the island. North Beach was amazing. We actually went hiking on some of the trails that they have to hike on that island, and it was really fun. So why don't you just tell us a little bit about who you are, where you're from? We already kind of know you're from Hawaii, and what you do.
Yeah, so currently got over 3,500 units, mostly mobile home parks and apartment buildings, workforce housing type, and secondary and tertiary markets. So none of the cool areas like Hawaii or California. I may live here, but invest for the numbers makes sense. But it wasn't always like that. It started with the first rental property back in 2009. Had just graduated college. I think a lot of people that are, kind of work with me are kind of the same linear path thinkers where we were taught to go to school, get a good job. For me, I happened to be good at math and science when I was 9 or 10. So I became an engineer in college and in my career. So, bought that first house to live in Seattle, then rented it out. And I think the rents were $2,200 a month. And the PITI, the mortgage payment, was $1,600. So I didn't know anything about rent to value ratios, where to buy, about being a landlord. I just got a property manager, and I, collected a few $100 of cash flow every month. And I was like, wow, I got to keep doing this again and again, get out of the rat race.
So that's kind of maybe how you. So I guess tell us a little bit how you got started. Obviously, you kind of have built quite a bit of a thing for yourself now, but is that you got started by just buying that first rental right out of college?
Right. Because I think I try and be sort of the anti-real estate guru. I mean, these guys come on stage and like they kind of wow everybody, but it all starts with that first rental property, and the one I bought was nothing special. And then I just saved up my money to buy another one. I mean, my claim to fame in my first 5-6 years of investing was, I had a good engineering job, had a good salary, but I saved pretty much most of it. I worked on the road for my company on expenses, so I really didn't have too much living expenses. So I was able to put away 40 to 60 grand a year from my day job every year to go put down as a down payment on a home. I don't do any wholesaling. I don't do flipping. I'm just more of a buy and hold conventional financing investor.
It's really interesting. I actually had a breakfast with a guy who works for me, and he kind of went. His parents are both in the medical field, so he didn't want to be a doctor. He didn't want to do that, but like he did end up going to college. Kind of came out with some college debt, and got right out of college and got this pretty good job, but it was like the worst job in the world. Like he went to work just dreading it from day one. And he was only like 22 years old, just dreading work because like, it was just like 80 hours a week. It was just, just total craziness, no appreciation, no culture, just complete corporate. Like if you don't hit your numbers, why not? And nothing else to kind of, really, really help with. And it was just so interesting because now he's working for me, probably getting paid half of what he was getting paid before, but he loves coming to work every single day. And you're kind of exactly right. Like most people are taught, like go to college, get a job, save up, put it in the stock market, and then retire, right?
Exactly. I mean, I went to work and, they paid me 80 grand out of college. I mean, I'm not complaining. But I was just a number. I had a crew of guys that worked for me, but the middle management and all like the stuff that got pushed down on us, I thought was kind of unfair. I mean, it kind of made I tried to run my team the way I wanted to, but in this big corporate conglomerate, people get lost. I actually had one time where an employee of mine, he died and nobody really cared. He died at a workplace accident. Nobody gave a damn. And things like that. And you're out there. I mean, we were traveling, 100% traveling crew, so we were never home. So stuff that you see, I mean, it's you and your crew out there. And I just realized that I didn't want to be doing this after 4 years old. And I got first class on everything because I traveled so damn much. But then I looked around. I'm like a 20-something-year-old kid, and I was like looking at these guys, and like, I know they're not seeing their family. I don't want that life.
So, it was interesting. I was listening to a national radio show over the weekend, and he actually basically kind of said, again, like anti this, like put all your money in the stock market. She was talking about the top 1% of wealth in the world. So if you look at the top 1%ers, or even if you go to the top 5%, they only have 26% of their entire portfolio or their entire wealth into stocks. But like basically we're taught like go get a job, put all your money in the stock market, 401k, and that's like your whole retirement. And they say it's diversified, but it's really not. And then the question was asked on the radio show, well, where are the rest of these assets? And they're like, well, small 5 to 10% of this is in bonds, 10 to 15% might be in life insurance or annuities. And then you've got this other chunk that's almost as big as, stock market that's in real estate or what they consider non-traditional assets. So I just thought it kind of goes along with this. And, if you're a listener out there and you're a passive investor of any kind, and you do, if you're not invested in real estate, I do know most of our audience probably is not anti-real estate. It probably does like real estate. But if you are on the fence, I will tell you that real estate is definitely one of the best ways to be able to create wealth over a long haul. So I'd love to take that story, so how do you get from buying that first house in Seattle to where you're at now? Like what were the changes that you had to make, and how did that path how did that journey go for you? Can you give us a couple of the key steps there?
Yeah, so once I bought that first one and I got that taste of cash flow, I got a little more sophisticated doing this, read some books, listened to some podcasts, and I learned several things like the rent to value ratio. You only buy things that are 1% or better. So the rent to value ratio, you take the monthly rent divided by the purchase price, and you're looking for something at 1% or higher. And when I was in Seattle, back then you'd be lucky to find something that was $400,000 that would rent for $2,500. That's well below 1%. So that's just not going to work. And then you start to learn that you don't go buy luxury properties, right? You're not going to get the rent to value or the returns, right? And then you also don't go to the low end, the war zone type of properties where you have to carry your gun to go collect your rent. But we have all property management too, so it's not like we're really doing that. But you kind of stay in the sweet spot here of good quality housing. We call them B and C class type of tenants in better than average areas, and that was how I progressed, just buying my rental properties. Eventually, Seattle, I got priced out of Seattle because Seattle is a primary market, much like a lot of California is in the East Coast. You're just not going to find the rent to value ratios. So that was where I started to purchase these turnkey rentals in Birmingham, Atlanta, and Indianapolis. And that was where I was able to hit 1% rent to value ratio or higher and really be able to scale from there.
Well, I'm glad you answered that, because that was going to be my next question. Like, so where did you find these rentals? I'm right outside of Chicago in Northwest Indiana, and I hear a lot of people that have invested in Indianapolis, and then when they come up and see my market, they're like, "Oh my goodness, this is even better than Indianapolis." And Indianapolis is like we thought was the best market in the United States for cash flow. So it is very interesting. Have you pretty much stayed in those three markets of Birmingham, Atlanta, and Indianapolis, or have you kind of gone into other markets?
Definitely moved out. I mean, things have kind of changed, right? I mean, places like Memphis have kind of changed. Indianapolis is just where a lot of out-of-state remote buyers go into these days. I mean, I think I mostly target the South and Southeast because that's where the job growth is. That's where the population is. Generally, people are moving from the northern areas to the southern, whether it's for heat or for, it's too cold up there or whatnot, or the economic job growth. But, so Texas, Alabama, Mississippi, places on that end of the world. So definitely, not California, not Washington, not New York, not those type of places. And then also we try and target more red states because we want to be the beneficiary of good landlord laws. So I'm not saying that, not to get political here, but in my opinion, if you don't pay, you can't stay. Right? That was the way I was grown up.
Yeah, it's whenever I hear somebody say that, I always there's a slide that Mr. Landler will show at some of his different things I've been to, and it literally says that pay, stay. Like, it's just, it should be that way, right? Like, I don't understand right now. We're kind of having some of these issues around the country where a lot of these states haven't been able to evict. We actually just started being able to evict. And our property management company manages about 300 properties, and we probably only have like 2 or 3 that we really need to evict. We've had really good luck throughout this. Our area has been very insulated, and we haven't really had as many job losses as you've seen like on the East Coast and some other areas. And we're in Indiana, so like we haven't been as shut down as some of the other states as well. But it definitely at some point we have to get back to some kind of normalcy, and it is gonna create some issues, at least in some areas. Do you see that as an opportunity, or do you see that as something that like maybe you're looking at, what parts of my market or what markets that I'm in are going to have, lower collection rates, or am I going to have to do a bunch of evictions, or like what's your mindset going into that right now?
Well, I mean, just the last, earlier this year when COVID first hit, we're normally hitting 97% collection. So you're always going to have a few deadbeats out of 100 not paying. That's normal. And then April, May, I got to admit, I was a little worried what happened. I've never been through a pandemic. But, our collections overall maybe dipped down into low 90s at the very worst. But, those who own rental properties know that, at least for us, like on our deals, like if we can stay a little bit above 50%, we're still making money. So we still had a big buffer in there. So, and then obviously we've kind of pulled out of it, July, August, we're kind of right back on track. Despite what's going on with some second wave or whatnot, it feels like people are getting back to normalcy out there.
Yeah, to a certain degree. What we've experienced was kind of a little bit weird. We actually had the highest amount of people apply for new rentals in April than we've ever had. It was the craziest thing in the world. And most of ours were people moving from multifamily homes to our single family homes. And they were just like, I cannot stay there. I'm not, because a lot of people were just really literally petrified. The media had us in this frenzy. So it was weird. And our collection rates actually went up. So normally we're right around that 97% collection rate as well. We actually went up. We were 98% in April and May. And then June and July kind of dipped down a little bit, probably into that 96% range. And then now we're probably back in this 96, 97 type, percent. So obviously our portfolios and our stuffs are a little bit different than they are obviously. And I think something that we learned through this is that different parts of the country did get hit in different ways. Even just Michigan right next to us, like they shut down really quick and a lot of things. Even some of my investors that are dentists, these poor guys, like they couldn't work for 4 months. It was nuts. So it's definitely something that to pay attention to what's going on, what's going to go in the future. But also, do you think that is going to present some type of an opportunity here coming forward? From the reports that I'm seeing and the economics that I follow, they're predicting somewhere between 900,000 and 1.3 million foreclosures in the next 18 months. Are you looking at any areas yourself to try to take advantage of that, or like what are your thoughts about that?
I mean, I'm sure there'll be a lot of foreclosures and opportunities for investors, but me personally, again, I'm more of a passive investor, right? I go after stabilized assets. So, I mean, we don't like on the single family home side, we don't wholesale, we don't flip houses, we don't buy distressed, right? We buy stabilized. And on the apartment side, we're buying properties that are 90% occupied, stabilized or more. Partly because of that is to get the non-recourse Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac debt, and that's one of the requirements. So if a property is going through some trouble and tenants aren't paying, we wouldn't buy it, right? Because it would reflect on the P&Ls. We wouldn't buy it. We don't buy problems, right? We don't buy properties with problems. We buy properties with owners who have problems, if that makes sense. So, I mean, a lot of different strategies out there, right? I mean, from my perspective, the stuff I buy, I don't know, it's just business as usual. The way I see it is I just want to pick up good assets that make a great yield day one. And if now I'm looking at like 2.9%, 3% debt. I mean, I want to lock that stuff as long as I can, right? I mean, at
Absolutely.
That level, I don't even have to buy that great of a property. I'm going to probably do great. And especially with inflation going the way it's going to go, right? How else are we going to pay for all this government stimulus in the future?
Somebody has to make money. So, well, that's good. I'm glad we got to kind of got in that about how you got started and got into real estate a little bit. And if somebody was buying their first rental, I guess right now, how, before we get into the rest of my questions, maybe just give the audience, like, what would your advice be if somebody was looking at buying their first rental right now?
Yeah, I would say focus on cash flow. And if you do that, you don't really have to worry about, what market you're buying in. I mean, people think that I don't care about what's happening in the news, but I frankly don't, right? Like at the end of the day, if you invest in the right markets and you invest in good areas, then your tenants will probably pay their rent most of the time. And then you don't have to worry about who's the president or what's happening with the pandemic. People need a place to stay and they will pay for that. So that's a lot of people I have an incubator group and we help them buy their first rental property remotely. And, I think I hear a lot of this, is this the right time to do this? I'm like, yeah, every time isn't the right time to do it. You're buying for cash flow, right? When you're buying for cash flow, you don't care if the price goes up and down. The price will go up and down. Most times it goes up, right? It's real estate, but we don't really count on appreciation. but we're buying this income stream basically. And that's the paradigm shift between people putting money into the stock market where they're trying to accumulate X amount of money, where in reality, what they really want is they want streams of income to be producing that end retirement. But why not have it now so I can take those streams of income and buy properties quicker, right? It's moving from that accumulation theory to the cash flow theory.
So I guess let me ask you one more question before we get back to my questions on that. What are you looking for when you're buying? So again, you're talking to a first-time buyer that's buying their first turnkey rental property. What are you looking for?
I'm looking for about 80% of the median home price. So a lot of these places, you're around $100,000, rents for $1,000. So that rent to value ratio, 1% or higher. I'm looking to buy in, obviously it's not going to be in the nicest school districts. You're not going to hit your numbers that way, but you're looking for an area that doesn't have homicide, that, the war zone, the class C or D or worse type of location. A good safe area where there's value there. And then, and then it's more important to find like a property manager like yourself in the local area. And, that way they can operate it because, we're passive investors. We don't want to deal with tenants, termites, or toilets, right? We want to scale, grow, buy more investments. The only way we're going to be able to do that is to focus on being investors, not landlords.
Yeah, that's part of the reason why I built my own property management company, because I was actually a turnkey provider for a long time, and I was just handing off my assets to somebody else to manage. And I felt like everything was going really well until I passed it off to the property manager, and it wasn't quite like what I wanted it to be. It wasn't the experience I wanted them, my owners, to be able to have. And the properties weren't renting as fast as I thought they could rent, and the turnover wasn't as quick. And for us, I actually really honestly believe that a good property manager is way more important than a really good property. You can buy a great property with a horrible property manager and you're going to lose money, probably. But if you have a good property and a really good property manager, they're going to be able to make that work.
And I think you got to think of it from a level of like, what is your highest and best use? So I think for you, Tom, like you have the ability, you're like 1 in 10,000 or 1 in 100,000 that can create a company like that. But for a lot of my folks, doctors, lawyers, engineers, the poor working stiffs out there, your highest and best use is more likely to just go to your day job, perform well there, save up your money, and invest passively in the right assets.
And honestly, I couldn't agree more. I see a lot of people that are in those, professions that you just talked about, thinking that they want to get out of what they're doing and move to doing like being an active investor. And I'm like, no. Trust me. There's two paths in real estate. Yes, you can be the active, but there's two paths. Number one is exactly what your model is what you promote, is that just work at your day job, keep this passive, either be a lender, invest into funds. For me, I love lending. I do some syndications, and then I own the rentals and vacation rentals and things like that we own. But like at the end of the day, like there's two paths. Either you can take my path, which is probably a harder path, or you could take the path of, investing your time, spending more time at work, making the money that you can make there, and then investing passively. And what I have found is that it's an easier path to do it, the way that you're promoting.
Right. But it's all kind of what you're working with, right? Like I don't go play basketball. I'm not 7 feet tall, right? I'm like, whatever my God-given strengths are,
Absolutely.
That's what I go and do, right? So for a lot of people who make over 60 grand a year, right, you make a good salary, just, be good stewards of it and save it and invest it passively. But, if you don't make that much money at your day job, maybe you should go find a better job, right? Or maybe you should go flip houses or wholesale houses to create some money. I just don't work with, those folks. Most of my guys are more passive investors, and that's what I kind of, zero in on.
And most people that should, and I agree, should stay as passive investors, but they've just got to find a way to create and cultivate those trusted relationship with trusted advisors that really do care about their investors and want to be a good steward for their investors as well. So that, to me, I think is the hardest thing to find. And when you find those people, you just want to hold on to them like gold. Like you just keep those relationships. you should be sending your property managers Christmas gifts. If your property manager is sending you a Christmas gift and you're not sending them one, like there's something wrong with this equation, because they are the ones that are really trying to do their best they possibly can for you. I think property management's one of those. It's a very hard job, because in a way you have two bosses, right? You work for the investor, and ultimately that's the person that you're supposed to kind of be a steward for. But at the other end, you have this tenant that has a completely opposite agenda, so to speak, than the owner does. So in the middle, you're literally sandwiched in the middle, trying to please both people, and sometimes it's not the easiest job to do. So I'm glad that you brought that out. I always like to ask all of our guests like about a challenge that they've had. So what's been one of your biggest challenges in your life? How have you overcome it, and what have you learned from that?
Yeah, so for me, like around 2015, 16, I had 11 rental properties. My goal was to quit my day job so I compiled cash flow. But, 11 rental properties at the time was only about $3,000 of passive income a month, which is nothing to complain about, right? That's pretty awesome. But I needed 3 or 4 times that amount. And with 11 rental properties, I had eviction or 2 every year, or some kind of big catastrophe that happened. Granted, as a passive investor, I don't do anything. I would just send you an email, or I would just, have to keep the property manager accountable. But if I needed 30, 40 houses to be financially free, it quickly becomes a job and a little bit of annoying to manage the manager. So that was when I kind of switched. I had to reboot. I had to get more into syndications and private placements, more of as a credit investor. And that was definitely a reboot, right? Because you're not networking with property managers. You're not networking with brokers. It's networking with other accredited high net worth investors to see what are they doing for taxes? What are they doing for legal protection? Where are they finding deals at? Where are they finding deal sponsors? And then I think I went into my first deal as a LP syndication investor, and I pretty much lost all my money because I just went off some random referral. Turns out that referral source just happened to be like an IRA company that didn't know what the heck they were doing. And now I only work with people who, if I need to have a personal relationship with somebody who's actually invested with them. But yeah, lesson learned. I didn't have the network that I did have now that I did back then. And that's why when your net worth goes over $500,000, it's so much more important that your network is very important. The same as your network is your net worth, right?
Absolutely. And I always add on to that statement. So a lot of people say, your network is your net worth. And I agree with that, but it's also your survival plan. And that's like people like you even admitted you haven't gone through a downturn yet. You haven't, so you started in 2009. Is that right? So you started literally at the best possible time in the last 20 years to start. After we had already crashed, after we've gone through what we've gone through. But right now, going through these next 3 to 5 years, which I believe is going to be, we are going to have some economic turmoil. That strong network is going to, you're going to see who the real players are, and who the people that have integrity, who the people that will try to make sure that they do what they say they're going to do in those times where it's not going to be so easy to be able to make that happen. And you're so right. So basically, to go back to your struggle. You said that your struggle was basically a time in your life in which you tried to step up your game. You took some risk. You went out there. You went out and about. Kind of got out of your comfort zone, and it was just like boom. Like you trusted the wrong person, and from that, like you lost a bunch of money. Did you lose other people's money, or was it just yours?
Just mine. I was just kind of doing it all by myself. But like now I can take that experience, and now I can go to the bar or to meet up these other accredited investors. And that's the juicy gossip they want to know. That gets me in the cool kids club, right? And I've kind of used that, don't work with this guy, to get me and navigate different networking groups and, to build up my own network organically. So everyone's got to do it, right? I mean, you can't just step into, to meet other passive investors that are high net worth, you've got to add some value to them, right? And they don't care about you buying them lunch or something like that. They don't, they don't need that.
Right. So you're kind of getting on this. First of all, you've been able to use it for your benefit, but second of all, like, what other things have you learned? I guess you kind of already brought out the fact that you got to make sure that you don't just vet the source, but you vet like your referral source, like who gave you the referral. You should be a little bit more than just, a custodian that really is not giving referrals. They're just maybe basically giving somebody a platform to speak. And, a lot of times I see passive investors see that just because somebody has a platform or just because somebody's talking, that they must know what they're talking about.
Right.
And that's just simply not true. It could not be farther from the truth. I can tell you from the Good Success Mastermind and the experiences that a lot of the people at the mastermind have had with other investors or with other places that they've put their money. Even some of the biggest hearted people I know that better. They know better. They even have presentations on how to do due diligence, and then they don't always do the same due diligence that they preach that they should do. And then they're like, I knew I should have done better, but I didn't do that. It is so important. And I always think that there's three parts of things that you should vet when you're vetting a deal. Number one, yes, you should vet the deal. Absolutely. Number two, you should be vetting the paperwork and making sure that everything is right. If there's something that doesn't seem right in that paperwork, like, you've got to bring it out and make sure that, you let proper people vet that and make sure that it's good to go. But most importantly, in my opinion, it's that person, it's the sponsor, it's the general partner, it's who's ever really being the steward for your money. And and then that's why, even for us, like, we encourage everybody that can possibly come out to join and see our team, see the culture, see the people that work here, see even the areas that they're going to invest in. And I know that you don't have to do that for every property. And I would say out of the 150 investors that we work with, probably only 40 or 50 of them have actually come out, but we are always like welcoming that. You should go out there if your money is actually worth anything to you. Like, you should take some time and try to get, like you said, get to know those people, break bread, take them to lunch, and not take them to lunch to like bribe them or like get them in your pocket, but take them to lunch just to break bread and, have that, that longer, deeper conversation that you can get to know people with. It's so important. So that's great. Anything else that you said that you've learned from that experience?
Yeah, I mean, I'll add a layer on top of that. When I go and work with different partners or pick associates, I mean, it's 50% the numbers. I mean, I want to check their underwriting, get the P&Ls, rent rolls, and I want to check things like reversion cap rate, whether the rent increases per year. I want to be able to determine what number I get at the bottom of the spreadsheet. And that in turn sort of tells me the integrity or sophistication of the operator. Then step two, if that checks out, step two, and now I go in my network and I ask the dirt on said operator. And then at that point, I will have my first conversation, introduction. Likely we'll probably know each other. I mean, I don't really jump into bed with anybody in the first 6 months anyway. I'm going to kind of just step back and see what they're up to after I go through that. But, and then, you mentioned like the paperwork. To me, it's not, I mean, here's my proxy around it. Like, I know all the attorneys that make all these documents personally, so I have that. But if not, I think you need to rely more on your network. Because I see one big mistake I see is, an investor will just get some random real estate attorney or just some attorney to go vet a syndication document. And that attorney is giving some random stuff just to justify their 4 billable hours. It's absurd, right? It's like, you don't take financial advice from somebody who's not financially free. You don't take legal advice from, on a syndication document from an attorney that doesn't do syndication law, right? So I would kind of simplify it and break it down to either you got to know the people or the numbers. But let's face it, most passive investors don't have a clue how to underwrite deals, even if they've owned a few rental properties. So I think that's why you hear the sage advice of like, people first. I'm just kind of lucky enough that I can decode the numbers before I go and waste my time vetting the person.
Yeah, when I say paperwork, I guess I'm trying to be more simplistic with paperwork. Like the fact that there's actually syndication documents. Okay, well, you probably have real paperwork. I guess what I have seen a lot of investors get into mistakes with is they just completely blind trust people with no paperwork at all. Number one, it's just like I sent him $25,000. He said he was going to do this. And I'm like, well, it, I might send somebody 25 grand if they're going to do something, but at least I'm going to have paperwork with it. I'm going to make sure that I know what you're supposed to do and I know what I'm supposed to do. I guess that's what I mean more for paperwork.
Yeah.
I've even seen people do like joint venture deals with people. And I'm like, sometimes these joint venture documents are just not, they look like they were created in somebody's basement and they don't have proper protections for both parties in there. That's what I mean.
Those JV deals are definitely the wild, wild west. But even the syndication law and a 150-page PPM, I mean, you can have some rogue syndication attorneys out there for sure.
Absolutely. So, but I'm more talking on the simplistic deals and making sure that that there is solid paperwork, that there is, like, if you're loaning money, make sure you are getting a deed of trust or a mortgage, and make sure that lien is getting filed. Like, that's what I mean by knowing that part of the deal, because that's just as important as how good the deal is, and it's just as important sometimes as how good the party is that's doing the deal, because people die, people go crazy.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of like I think it's worth mentioning because people make those basic mistakes. That said, I would say don't do anything for the first 6 months unless you have somebody that you trust that doesn't have a dog in the fight, not going to get any referral fee, that has your best interest in heart. And the only way to build that is to create organic relationships with people and nurture them. And then, that person is going to sort of calibrate you and say, hey man, like, dude, this contract's whack, right? Like, why would you do that?
Yep, I totally, I love it. I love the 6-month rule that you brought out. I also love the fact of, don't do a deal with somebody, especially if they're in a network. If you're in a network with other people, don't do a deal with somebody that's in that network unless you've talked to other people that have done deals with that person in that network. It really is good rules of thumb, and I really do appreciate you bringing that out. So, I like to ask people why they do what they do. Why I do what I do is pretty important. I'm trying to flip the city of Gary, Indiana. I'm trying to give away a bunch of money because I kind of feel like that's kind of the reason why God placed me on this earth, is to help churches and missionaries and orphanages and different things around the world. But everybody kind of has their own why story. Why do you do what you do?
Yeah, so probably around like 2014 and 15, I went through I don't know if it's like a quarter life crisis, but my net worth, I wasn't an accredited investor yet, but my cash flow was definitely on the trajectory so that I could quit my job in the next 5 years. And I started to kind of embody that. Kind of my mindset got a little lighter, and then I kind of started to think what I was going to do after, right? And I think what a lot of people will say is like, well, they're going to go on vacation, or they're going to go to Thailand, they're going to drink pina coladas on the beach because they're financially free, FI, and they can just do nothing, right? And take pictures of their food and put it on Instagram. But then I started to kind of simulate it in my head, and it kind of got me depressed. And it was like, okay, well, what's next, right? And I went to, Tony Robbins. I started to, embody that stuff. And then, hearing it from different angles is like people who contribute back are people who are truly happy, right? What good is all this money if you just kind of miser it and keep it to yourself, right? Like, you got one ticket at this life, you might as well do something big with it and create a legacy. So for me, I mean, I started my podcast back in 2016 just as a means to, like, all my buddies were asking me, how do you buy these properties remotely? You don't even visit it. And, none of my friends did anything. So I was wasting my time. So I just started to record it. So I was like, if you can't even like listen to the first 5 podcasts, I'm not going to waste my time with this. So that was the start of it. And I started to get a lot of good feedback. People were like, oh, this is pretty helpful. And, it ultimately helped me buy my first rental property. And then I got to admit, that was kind of cool, right? To make an impact that way. So that's been kind of my I want to create some kind of free resource out there to give people the motivation and the knowledge to go out and buy a rental property where they don't live, because it changed my life. I mean, 10 years ago, I was just another guy making 80 grand, probably going to be working at that crappy job for 40 years, 50 years, who knows, right? But yeah, I quit my job, engineering job, a couple years ago, and you know, definitely went on this different path.
So let's just get into that then. So right now, do you have any exciting project or anything that you're working on that you'd like to be able to share with the audience?
Yeah, so I would say, like, you know, people want to kind of find more about this stuff. I mean, just check out my first, dozen podcasts, and I'm totally willing to get on the phone and kind of help people out, and just a quick call, kind of point you in the right direction. I think that was what I wish I had when I got started.
Gotcha.
I've
So you
got,
have the podcast, and the podcast is a simple passive cash flow podcast.
Right. And then we also have like a closed Facebook group where I have to kind of interview people, and then it's free, but I want to kind of keep it small and keep the quality of the people in there. But people want to get access to that, they can shoot me an email, Lane@simplepassivecashflow.com.
So just one more time for the audience, and if you're watching this on Facebook, we will link this in the comments below. But it's simplepassivecashflow.com is the website, I'm assuming, and then there's also the Simple Passive Cash Flow podcast that you can watch, I'm assuming, on most or all of the iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, all the podcast platforms, I'm assuming. And then also, if you would like to get in touch with Lane, or I'm assuming it's a Simple Passive Cash Flow, probably Facebook group as well that you're promoting. So you guys could go there as well. Or if you'd like to email Lane, he did give his email address, and we can link that below again. It's Lane@simplepassivecashflow. Is that correct?
That's correct.
.com. So if you guys want to get in touch with Lane about that, or if you guys want to be a part of his passive Facebook group, or if you guys want to learn more about his podcast, and I'm assuming on the podcast he's talking about passive cash flow, right? And how you can do that, and kind of the lessons that he's learned through that. I really appreciate your time today, Lane, and I appreciate your investment in our community here at Good Success. For me, Good Success is important to me. Just the name itself, to me has integrity in it, and to me, I want to have the right kind of success with everything that we do. When you heard that name, Good Success, it's always something that we ask everybody that gets on the podcast. What does that mean to you? What does good success mean to you?
I think it's like kind of putting, you take the elevator up, but you send it back down for somebody else. Kind of help them along as best as you can.
So have success, but also help somebody else with it along your way. It's awesome. All right. So we got one more question, and one more question is all we've got left. We ask every single person that comes on the podcast. We're always just trying to pull one more nugget or one more, speech of truth, or just one more life lesson from every single one of the amazing guests that we have on the Good Success podcast. So Lane, if you were to leave the audience with just one thing, maybe it's a book, maybe it's a concept, maybe it's a piece of advice, a life lesson. If you want to get one message out to the world, what would that be?
Yeah, I would say begin with the end in mind. I mean, for me, it was, getting enough cash flow to leave my job, and so I could do whatever I wanted, whenever I wanted, remotely. So I see too many high-paid professionals investing in, more active activities where really they should be more of a passive investor. I get it. If you don't have that much money, you have to be active. But if you're able to, most of my investors save at least 30 grand a year. Some of the better ones are like $50,000 to $100,000 a year. That's enough to buy a couple rental properties a year. Of course, you should probably scale to syndications at some point, but just think about how that grows, right? And then taking 401ks and all that mutual funds, I'm not a big fan of. Just a lot of heavy fees, and I think that's what ultimately robs a lot of hardworking people of be able to retire in 10 years.
So awesome. Start with the end in mind, and really just get started. And then kind of figure out what that pathway looks like for you guys. It's awesome. Well, again, thank you, Lane, so much for spending some time with us and investing in our community. We really do appreciate all of your investment, and obviously all of the success that you've had with 3,500 properties. That's just crazy. And really, like, you started doing it by just buying one simple rental, and then from there you scaled by, using other people's knowledge and using other people's networks to be able to find turnkey rental operators that were in good areas, that had good solid properties and good solid property management. And from there, you just scaled by syndications and doing other, apartment deals and that kind of stuff. So it's really been a pleasure to have you on the Good Success podcast. I really do appreciate your time. So that's going to do it for today's episode, guys. Really, like, you can do it. At the end of the day, I want to let everybody know that if you want to be just like Lane, you can do it. He didn't say that he started as, like, getting this big inheritance, which is what most of us think. Everybody that's like Lane must have started with a bunch of inheritance. He didn't have like a bunch of money given to him. He just made it happen with just simply making what a lot of other people are making. He wasn't even in the top 5%. He wasn't even making $150,000 or $200,000 a year, which a lot of the people that are listening to this are. He simply was making $80,000 a year and said he wanted to make this happen. So I just want to use that today as encouragement. Whatever it is that you want in this life, you can have, but do it for a purpose. Try to find somebody else to bring along with you. That's awesome. If you guys are interested in the Good Success Mastermind, you guys can go to goodsuccess.com. We have some exciting things coming up for the next boot camp. We are doing a Know Your Numbers boot camp with most investors. I'm going to tell you, passive and active investors don't know their numbers to the degree that they can. And you'd be shocked at how much money you can make from your investments by knowing your numbers better. So if you guys are interested in the Know Your Numbers boot camp, go to goodsuccess.com, or just find me on Facebook, anywhere you can find me on Instagram, LinkedIn, message me, and we can get in touch with you there. That would be fine. And then if you guys would just do us a favor, if you guys have liked this podcast, if it's done anything for you, just go to iTunes and give us a 5-star review, and share this with your friends on the social media platforms. Just let your friends know about the Good Success podcast. That's going to do it for today's episode, guys. Remember to be a conduit, not a bucket. Work to have to give. God bless. We hope you have enjoyed this episode of the Good Success podcast, and we hope to see you on the next one. God bless.